and welcome to the MSO's Up Late with Ben Northey. I'm Sarah Curro and I play in the first violin section. And in a real turn of events, tonight's guest is the host himself, the incomparable Ben Northey. And if this episode had a title, it would be, "Would the real Ben Northey please stand up?" Because I don't know any other person who has led so many complete and successful lives in the one life. And I know any of you who've seen him conduct will want to know everything about him and what makes him tick. So Ben, welcome to your own show.
I'm so nervous I can't even begin to explain it, Sarah. It's very different being on the other side, but thank you so much for doing this. And really, it's Up Late with Sarah Curro, let's face it. That's exactly what's happening.
Maybe you're not used to not being the boss of a situation. Don't worry, I will be gentle.
Yeah, that could be it. Maybe I'm more of a control freak than I thought. But I'm up in Brisbane at the moment because I've been on the road for about a month. You know, when the Melbourne lockdown hit, I had to make a run for it up to Sydney to do concerts, and been in New Zealand, and now I'm up in Brisbane. I've got concerts here this week, and I haven't had a haircut for a while. Like, I'm going the full Conan O'Brien when I look at it.
Well, at least you're allowed to get a haircut being in Brisbane. So
this is the guilt I'm carrying with me everywhere I go at the moment.
It's okay. You always show your solidarity towards us Melburnians. So you recently interviewed my sister Monica and I, as you will well remember, and that's available for everyone to rewatch on the MSO YouTube channel. But I just love, Ben, that I get the chance to return the compliment and delve into your life and what makes you you. So here it is. This is the young life of Benjamin Northey. Parents, teachers, go.
Yeah, well, Mum was a great pianist at home. We had the piano in the front room. Dad played the guitar and sang. I think Mum probably would have liked to have gone to the conservatorium, but it was just kind of like her parents went no, and you know that's not going to happen. It was just music in the house, big record collection, and I was brought up in Ballarat. So there was a lot of music going on in that town. It's kind of notoriously musical. I think that, you know, partly to do with the history of the place, the fact that there's a theatre there, the South Street competitions that were there every year. But when I was thinking back to how I got my start, it led me back to when I must have been very young, you know, like 3 or 4 years old. And there were two people, Pete and Marge Sargent, who taught and lectured in music in Ballarat. And they are the parents of Fiona and Angela, who play in the orchestra, right? So Peter was in charge of music at the Performing Arts School at Ballarat University. And he was a great musician. He had classical recorder ensembles in Ballarat, and he encouraged the teaching of recorder in primary schools. He was one of the first people to do that. Marge was a violinist, and it was them who started up this early childhood music program with their ORF music ensemble workshops for young kids. And Mum took me along to those, and she always tells a story of how much I just loved those workshops. And, you know, I just loved playing the instruments and like getting the chance to have a bash on the drums and, you know, I play all the different things. And I think that was sort of, she just saw that I loved it and kept feeding the appetite for it. So I was really lucky that I got that early start. And I remember she went out and bought the Karl Orff Schulwerk records, you know, and I used to enjoy listening to those. And, you know, it just all took off from there. Like I, you know, learned piano from Mum as a real little kid. And then when I was at school, I had a great violin teacher when I was in prep called Jane Davidson, who's a longtime MSO subscriber. And she got me started on the fiddle, but I just couldn't wait for the next one. I just thought, I didn't think you ever stuck to one instrument. I didn't think that's how it worked. I was like, oh, what comes next after the violin, you know?
Wow.
And I went on to the trumpet, and I learned trumpet for 4 years in primary school with a great teacher called Lance Black. I think he was someone who'd played in the MSO even, you know, back in the day. And he's just this guy teaching in Ballarat, you know, fantastic teacher. And I played in the Ballarat Junior City Brass Band and all that stuff. And then when I got to secondary school, I'd moved on to flute by then in about grade 6. I had really great teacher, Keith Wilson, he was one of those guys who was in the old ABC show bands, like with Julie Rains and all those, like just incredible musician and woodwind doubler. So, you know, he played the flute, clarinet and the saxophone all all very well. But he taught me a lot about music theory, and then I had a great teacher called Barry Curry at secondary school, and he played all of the woodwind instruments. And again, I just thought that's what you did. So I'm pretty sure I switched to the saxophone. Like I did my sixth grade flute, and I was like about 14, and I thought, I think I was trying to impress girls. I'm pretty sure that was the reason.
There is no other reason when you're that age, I'm sure.
And also back then, saxophone was very cool. It's not so cool anymore.
Still kind of. I mean, if you're reminiscing about the 80s, the sax is great.
That's true. That's true. We've gone full circle on the retro thing. So yeah, I just had excellent teachers. You know, it's the one thing that comes through in all these interviews. The people who gave musicians their start. It's always the inspiring and great teachers. You know, and we just had so many of them at Ballarat College, where I went to school there. But, you know, I did 2 years at Ballarat High School. Even there was a great drummer called Don Kirby, who was absolutely fantastic. Brenda Beck ran the band program there. But, you know, you got a lot of work in Ballarat. That was the thing. There was theatre happening all the time. I played in pit orchestras when I was a teenager, got paid, you know, like $20 a show. That's, you know, unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what changes your life. Once you start making money from music and playing something, you'll keep doing it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So
and
true.
What about your transition to fully being a professional jazz musician? How did that sort of come about in your own mind? Yes, I want to do that.
Yeah, well, it was weird. I'd always sort of I'd always approached it from a classical point of view. So I was going through the AMEB exams. I'd done the flute and I was, I think, doing 7th grade saxophone. But at school we had a big band, and I loved playing jazz. And when I was about 16, this guy called Russell Hammond, who was working for Yamaha Music at that point in Melbourne, he came to Ballarat to do a workshop with the concert band at school. And I remember I had a solo or something, and he kind of, you know, came up afterwards and said, "Oh, I'm looking for people to come to America, like for musicians to come to America for a 1-month tour." And we were going to be doing a music camp in Los Angeles at the University of Southern California. We were going to Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp in Michigan, which is a really serious summer camp in the States. A lot of the big New York, you know, great musicians were coming there to tutor. And then the World Association of Symphonic Bands and Ensembles, which was in Boston that year. So I went, like mum and dad, I don't know, they like sold some stuff or something. And I ended up having this amazing opportunity at the age of 16. And that was the moment. That was like the absolute light bulb moment, especially Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, that big band I played in there. I was playing lead alto in that big band, and some of the amazing musicians I got to work with from New York who were just mind blowing. And I came back and I was like, full steam ahead. This is what I'm doing. Everything else can just go off to the side now.
Of course, that's not what happened, though, is it? You decided that being an exceptional jazz musician wasn't enough for you, of course. So you had to start to become a conductor? How does that just happen?
Oh, that happened a lot later. Okay. That was a lot later. So, you know, because I went to uni initially at the Institute of Education, which is that big building on the corner of Grattan Street and Swanston Street, right? That used to be like the teaching school. And there was a great saxophonist there, Peter Clinch, classical saxophonist. I really wanted to learn with him, and I went there, and his book was full. I couldn't even get any lessons with him at all. And then I dropped out and I started getting gigs in Melbourne, and I played in bands and started doing recording sessions, and actually was like living that freelance life of just gig to gig and session to session, and really enjoying it, I have to say. And I did that for quite a few years. You know, I played in a lot of like the Australian show band. I played with Tommy Emmanuel, the great guitarist, and toured with him. We went to the States and recorded together. It was really amazing time. But when I went back to uni, that was how the conducting happened, because when I was I must have been 25 by that point, and I went back to university at the Con this time to study classical saxophone, and I did my honors degree there, and then that's where I met John Hopkins. And so
let's talk about the beautiful Hoppy. Let's talk about his influence. I mean, I could talk to you about your jazz life for the next 2 hours because it still amazes me that you reached such a high level and you were extremely successful touring all of that. But then you turned to something else.
Well,
and
Yeah, I did, and it was as much of a surprise to me as anyone. But when I think back to what I was listening to as a kid, it was the records that Mum and Dad had. So the recordings of Rhapsody in Blue with Bernstein playing, the Copeland Clarinet Concerto
Yeah.
with Benny Goodman, and I loved that intersection between classical and jazz music, and that's sort of just I think that's informed a lot of the choices or the things that I've gravitated to even as a conductor as well. But yeah, when I met Hoppy, it was in the final year of the performance degree, and I was practicing so hard for that recital at the end of that year. It was a really big year, and we had to do a 6-month elective in conducting, and everyone just had to do it. It was a massive class, and John Hopkins had just turned up from the National Academy. He'd been running the National Academy of Music after having done everything, Sydney Con, Victorian College of the Arts, all the things, the absolute legend. um, and so he set up that class. And the other thing that I didn't talk about was the arranging that I'd done for the recording session. So I'd done a lot of that kind of notational arranging, and I ended up doing his arrangements for the small ensembles that we had in that conducting class. And I really enjoyed it, and it was such an amazing experience to meet him, and just this different world of music that opened up before all of us, really. And he was just such a energetic, inspiring person who believed in like thinking big and the art of possibility, and like you can make things out of nothing and all this kind of stuff. It was absolutely incredible.
Well,
And
he
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 said,
was from
yeah,
a culture that really encouraged people to be an all-rounder musician. So that arranger, composer, performer, all of that stuff. That's what I get from the English people who come here and stay and want to make our country like that too.
yeah, possibly. I think he certainly kind of saw potential
Mm.
in my skill set, if you like, and then was the one who said, "Look, come and study next year. Like, I think you should give it a shot." And I honestly thought he was mad. Like, I was just like, "What? What? That's like so optimistic.
Wow.
It's ridiculous." I just, I was not one of these guys who, I was like, I have to be a conductor. It wasn't like that at all. It was really because he believed in me
Mm.
to the point where he made me believe in myself.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to try something new, and just learn.
And
and
what
and
were lessons like, Ben? What were they actually like? Did he nitpick, or did he, question your movements? What's a lesson with Hoppy look like?
Yeah, there were two aspects to it. I mean, I was really lucky because at that point I was the only student in the master's program because he'd only just set it up.
Right.
And so I was going around to his house and we were just going through scores on his couch, just like, one after the other, all the Beethoven symphonies. He said, everything you need to know is pretty much in these Beethoven symphonies. So let's just go through all of them,
Fantastic.
slowly. And I'll show you how you do it. And then in terms of practicing the physical part, he had a very specific kind of way to teach movement, minimal gestures, economy of gesture. But he was also talking a lot about the communication with the orchestra, and the interpersonal skills were really big for him. And that was something that I learned a lot from him, actually, about that connection with the musicians you're working with, and that transaction, that relationship of you're only as good as what they'll give you. you know it's really that simple. It's amazing how that works.
This
And he
is one
was,
of the questions
yeah.
that I have for you is how do you negotiate with the orchestra subliminally and subconsciously uh, if you find some resistance? I mean, it's a difficult question for you to answer because you might give some secrets away as you answer it, but that's one of the questions I think of when I look up at you. I think, how's he going to get what he wants here? What's he doing next? I watch you so carefully and it's not for the beat. So, any
Yeah,
secrets to
that's right.
share?
Yeah, well, you seem to know me better than I know myself, Sarah. Like, often you'll come up to me in a break or something, and you'll say, "Oh, yeah, I could see what you're doing there." I was like, "What? How? That's impossible." And yeah, so it's a very difficult thing to answer because it all depends. It depends on the circumstance.
Yeah.
But I must admit, I think you know, I I've got a baseline approach that is built on trust and respect. So that for me is the most important starting point in terms of how I relate with the musicians in front of me. I love collaborating. You know, I'm not one of these people who think I've got all the answers the whole time. You know, I'm very aware I don't, and I go, you know, I hear someone play something a different way, and I'll think, wow, and that's the thing about you're responding as well as leading, and that's it. I think jazz has kind of taught me that as well. You're constantly reacting to what you're hearing the whole time. That's a very handy skill to have on the podium, is to be able to kind of give people space to play, and also lead when you need it. It's not all the time, you know, that you have to be leading. So
absolutely, that's beautiful. It's a delicate negotiation when you've got musicians who want to do it their own way. I mean, you've got some fierce supporters like Jeff Crellin. Shout out to Jeff Crellin. He loves you. Now he's fussy. I'll say this on air. He's a fussy person, and when I realized that Jeff was a huge supporter of you, what I also realized was that Jeff also believes in great talent. And Jeff could also see in you that you will only get better and better and better. Because as you say, the jazz lets you respond to the moment. And that's something that I think a lot of us can learn from you. Respond to the moment. Don't try and anticipate what's going to happen. Just respond to the moment.
Be in that present moment. But yeah, I owe Jeff a lot, and that was the other thing we never touched on, was that sort of after the lessons with John and that journey to actually turning that into somebody standing on a podium in front of an orchestra. Jeff was absolutely pivotal in that. You know, I ended up in the Symphony Australia Young Conductor of the Year competition in 2001. And that was my first year in that competition. It was so exciting. We had the Finnish teacher, arguably the most successful conducting teacher of all time, Jorma Panula. We had Jorma 5 days a week for 10 weeks that year.
Wow.
Like, that's how to do it. That's how you train conductors. It's not, you know, little masterclasses thing. It's that concentrated time. It was unbelievable. And, you know, I just, and after that, you know, I did well in that competition. I won the competition. I got some money for the first time in my life, and was able to, you know, audition for the Sibelius Academy and go there. But Jeff Crellin gave me my first professional experience with the Australia Pro Arte Chamber Orchestra. What they made of me, I just shudder to think, you know, this absolute green stick, just like, you know, I just am grateful they didn't completely throw me out. Like, honestly, it's just, I never forget that faith. And that was Crellin. That was Jeff Crellin. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do it without his support. Yeah, it's amazing. He's an amazing man.
How fantastic. Are you willing to talk a little bit about your time at the Sibelius Academy, and with the focus of, I'm interested in what they made of an Australian, because Australia isn't necessarily known for its great ancient cultural European heritage necessarily. So was it an issue? Was it a non-issue? Did they just treat you like another student? What was it like when you went there?
Well, that was the great thing about the Sibelius Academy, about Finland. As a rule, it's very different than Central Europe, so, and even London, because those old world kind of stereotypes, they're not really existent in Finland. And I actually think that's one of the reasons that they've produced so many great conductors, because they've just got a different approach. They're not weighed down by some of the traditional approaches. I mean, Jorma Panula is a progressive. He's a maverick. You know, for a start, it wasn't about the piano playing repetiteur pathway that Central Europe is obsessed with. It was about instrumentalists. He wanted instrumentalists. So you look at all of the Finnish conductors. Esa-Pekka Salonen is a horn player. Osmo Vanska is a clarinet player. You know, Jukka-Pekka Saraste, violin player. Susanna Malki, violin player. Mikko Frank, violin player. Wow. Many of them were experienced orchestral musicians already. They'd been playing, often in principal chairs, in the orchestra. And that was the thing I'm sure that they were looking for. Like, when I did that audition, and it wasn't so much that I was Australian that bothered me. It was the fact that I was playing the saxophone. Oh, right. That was the bigger issue for me. And like, you know, I had to play for the audition, and it was a 2-day audition. There were 40 people, And I mean, there'd already been some Australians in that class, like Luke Dolman had been there. A guy called Benjamin Berry, I think years before that, was there. But yeah, out of that 40 people, there was this two-day audition where we had to do oral tests and, like, sight reading. We had to play, and I wrote an etude for them. And I, said, this is the world premiere of my etude, and I played it on the saxophone. And I asked them straight up, that the guys who were on that panel, is this an issue? And honestly, they were just simply looking at the music, listening to the music, going, oh, I really enjoy this piece, and this is interesting what you've done here. So there wasn't that judgy attitude. It was very open like that. So that was refreshing, actually, because I just felt like, well, this is the right place for me.
Fantastic.
A very open-minded place, an incredible opportunity to conduct an orchestra twice a week, every week of the semester. I mean, that's just unheard of.
That's incredible.
You never get that. You never get that training. Almost nowhere.
Your life so far, as you've described it in this 21 minutes that we've been talking, it sounds like you've only ever had great opportunities and no one judging you. Well, I mean, that's maybe an exaggeration, but I always wonder why you have this remarkable respect for all kinds of music. So you don't have that similar snobbery or preference for, Austro-Germanic music over English music or anything like that. It seems like most of the time you're just like, yeah, this is great. And I want to know if that's why. I mean, there's so many factors to why you just love everything. And you're not just a total nerd. I mean, you are a little bit of a nerd, loving everything, but you bring respect to every kind of music, and I really appreciate that. So do you feel like that consciously, or it's just an accident?
I think it comes from this eclectic background. I mean, it's really, and also the understanding that you can have your tastes, you can have your own tastes and your preferences. Everyone's got different ones. And, I mean, you could specialize in a certain area of repertoire, for example, and actually over time that ends up kind of happening. That's happening more and more now that I've been doing this for 20 years. You sort of work out your strengths and your weaknesses, and you work out the things that you've got more to say with. Having said that, I can appreciate the artistry in a lot of those different genres, like the movie composers, the pops, the lighter music that we've done, the collaborative music, new music. I can see the artistry. I can see what people love, especially about that too. And for me, it's really about the connection with the audience. And if I can see that there's an audience who love it, that is everything, because that means there's something there that you can really tap into. And all, I'm a child of that sort of 1980s, where it was all the John Williams movie scores and things. Like when we've talked about this before, but when those movies come up, I'm genuinely thrilled. I'm like, wow, get to conduct Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like I sat in that movie theater when I was 14, 15 years old and just waited until the end credits had finished because I was listening to the play out and just thinking, these musicians, listen to this music. My God. It was amazing. And so then we get to perform this stuff. I know you love it too.
I do.
And also you start to understand the connections between that and all of the great 20th century music, and then into the late romantic music of Europe, how that went to America. Like, it's unbelievable, the connection between all of these things.
That's right. What the film composers, what John Williams really did for us was answer the question that gets bandied around a lot. How do you make classical music relevant? And I don't like that question, I'll have to say, because I believe it is relevant if it's at a high enough standard for people to still want to pay money for, which they do. So it's still relevant. But what John Williams did was make it so relevant that every kid can sing 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of his scores. And so if that's in our popular culture, it's still relevant. So I have to say that thank goodness for him. And he's accused of being a plagiarist and all of that, but
it's not so much that. I mean, every composer's a plagiarist, right?
To an extent, yeah.
It's just how it works. But I mean, he brought the orchestra sound into the mainstream of popular culture, and that is an incredible thing to do. Yes, he was referencing the Eric Korngolds and the Max Steiners and You
Yeah,
know, all of
absolutely.
these composers of and Shostakovich and Stravinsky and Prokofiev, and you know, he's not the first person to do that, but he sort of makes it his own as well. You know,
Yeah,
it's not like it's
absolutely.
a complete lifting of material. He's just using that language.
That's
And
right. And
thank
the most
goodness.
important point is the producers often hand the composer an audio clip of Stravinsky Rite of Spring, and they say, "We want that. Can you
Yeah.
make that sound?" So they're
Yeah.
often bound to what the producer wants.
Yeah,
Anyway,
well, it was a real deliberate strategy to get that swashbuckling
yeah,
score sound from the golden age of Hollywood in the 50s and 40s
yeah,
and apply it to a sci-fi film like
yeah.
Star
I
Wars. You
know.
know, it's the same thing. It's lightsabers, it's swords, it's just the
Yeah,
old
yeah,
film updated.
completely,
And they did a brilliant job doing that. So yeah,
absolutely.
I have great respect for lots of different kinds of music.
Yes, and this leads me to my next question, which is probably your answer might have to be a secret as well. So feel free to evade it or lie or whatever. But do you prepare, or are you just like the greatest reader of scores of
What do
all
you mean,
time?
do I prepare?
Well, the thing
Do
is,
I prepare?
you're always working. I don't know when you would get a
All
moment to
right.
prepare a score. Like, doesn't it take time to actually prepare a score, or are
It
you just
does,
come
yeah.
swashbuckling in and just read it and wave your arms around and see how it goes? Because you always manage it, and I don't know
Yeah.
how. So, what's your
It's
secret?
different when like the films are different than doing a symphony concert. They are. And the difference is the priorities interpretively completely change. So with the films, you're reproducing something. And the musicians are so great. Those film scores usually are so well laid out. They just absolutely rip it to pieces. It's incredible. And I can concentrate on the synchronization, and we actually do have a lot of fun musically with those shows too. But
Yeah.
conducting a symphony, it's an interpretive thing. That's the whole point. You have to come with a vision that has to be so well thought out and prepared. So that I would say is different. I'm a fast reader, and that was one thing at the Sibelius Academy. They used to make us read on the podium. They would just say, "You have to be able to do this. Here's your score. Conduct it now." Or they give you like 2 minutes, you know, just to look through, mark a few tempo changes, work out where the priorities are, the corners. You know, the rest of it, just let the orchestra go. Here, you've got to help them there and do this and change that tempo and all that kind of thing. And so that's a skill. But I have to say, I think all of the Finns are like that too. They were fast. Espek Salonen, that guy, he can just conduct anything. You could put a score in front of him. Andrew Davis was like that too.
Yep.
Just read anything. And that was from his
Marcus
BBC
Dents
dramas.
Marcus Dents was like that too. Just
Yeah, right.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
and you get good at it. It's kind of a fluency that comes, but you know, there's no substitution for preparation. That is the conductor's superpower. That's all you've got.
Yep,
Is
yep.
your preparation. That's
Absolutely.
the whole thing when you're doing a big concert. So.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think it's time that we played some music. Let's play some music. And in
All
true Up Late with Ben Northey style, the guest must select a piece. So your piece selection was Ravel's Piano Concerto in G. And
Yeah.
the recording is us this Feb 2021, and Tim Young was the soloist. Thanks to
He
the
was.
ABC for this recording. So here's a short, if Darren's ready to play our short excerpt, here is a short excerpt from Ravel's Piano Concerto in G.
A little bit
So
of the second movement, so beautiful, isn't it? I mean, that I love. I conducted that piece in my diploma concert at the Sibelius Academy. It was Brett Dean's Amphitheatre, the Ravel G major piano concerto, with a dear friend of mine playing solo, and then we did Brahms 1, and that was the program. So I've just always loved that, and I love that again. It's a combination of jazz sounds and Ravel's beautiful improvisational style, especially, and Tim Young played that so beautifully. But that beginning of the second movement, it's an improvisation. It's as if it's just being completely invented on the spot. I just love that. I love that idea, and really that's the goal. It felt for all music, is that it should sound spontaneous and like it's being created right there in the moment.
Absolutely. Speaking of the moment,
This is
I've
the
noticed.
moment.
I've also noticed about you that you are the most amazing MC of all time, and I know that sometimes you
That's
prepare
a
that.
big call.
I
That's a
mean,
very
you,
big.
you are
That's some stiff competition there.
literally hilarious, and just I can feel that you just want to connect with that audience, and you're just hilarious. You're real American style, actually. And so, look, it's one thing having all of these skills and all of that, but I bet you they didn't teach you that in the Sibelius Academy, how to get up and be Mr. Showbiz. So do you remember your first time you had to be an MC and you had to be all jazzy and snappy and so on, but you had to conduct 7 million notes at the same time? What is there like a scary memory, or have you always just been amazing at it?
No. There's some shocking stories about my early attempts at being that guy. Oh man, there was a regional tour in Queensland really early on. And actually, when you've got to compare and conduct, that's the hardest thing to do. That is the hardest gig. It's really hard. And it's usually a concert where there's like 20 pieces of music and it's super tough. And, you know, I've always loved those musical comedians like Victor Borge, Danny Kaye. Like I could watch those clips forever. I just think they're fantastic. I love the idea of having humor on stage, and audiences love that as well. It's part of that connection with the audience. But yeah, I was up in Northern Queensland on one of the regional tours. And one of the very well-meaning education people said, you know what, you should tell a few jokes and be that guy, you know, who's really funny. And anyway, I remember I had in about, I don't know, 5 years earlier, I'd played in the band for Jerry Lewis, the comedian, when he came out. I played in the band. It was an amazing experience. We had all the old Sinatra big band charts and everything. It was incredible. I got to play in that band. Anyway, so I watched this show, and Jerry Lewis is the most politically incorrect comedian of all time because he's about 150 and he can get away with it because he's Jerry Lewis, right? Yes. And I told one of his really blue jokes, like, and it was just, I mean, half of the audience thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard, and the other half were just like, and it was so wrong. And the orchestra just were crying with laughter, like just thought it was the funniest thing in the history of the world. And I remember thinking, well, what am I even doing? Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it made me kind of refine, let's say, that part of my my kind of skill set. And so since then, yes, I have worked at kind of presenting acceptable content when I'm asked to speak. And I do love it. I love talking about the music, you know, the town hall concerts. I really enjoy that. Audiences really appreciate that as well. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, I do kind of like flicking the switch to vaudeville, telling a few jokes when the moment is right.
Now, I was worried about you for a while because I really believed that you were working too hard. You seem to be in a good mood all the time, but so do I, and I'm not, and I'm often working too hard. So do you think you've got a bit of? Can you say no? Can you ever say no?
I think when I started, I didn't, and you know, I remember the advice I had from Trevor Green. Actually, it was how many general managers back is he? 4. It was like the first general manager who's at the MSO when I joined, and he said conduct everything except a bus. And I thought that was pretty good advice, because you have to. The only time you get to practice is on the podium, I mean, in front of an orchestra. And so starting out, and you know, the other thing was coming from the freelance world, if you're free, you say yes. Like if your diary's free and someone's calling, it's a yes. It's not a maybe. It's a definite yes. And you lock it in and you commit. And that was kind of the world that I'd come from. And so when I started getting work here in Australia, it was very much like that. It was like, wow, this, you know, take everything. And it's probably a little out of control there for a while. It's become, I'm equally busy now, but it gets easier the more you do it, especially when you're going back to repeat repertoire that you know. That changes the equation a little bit. But I found for me, my body and mental health will just let me know when it's too much. Like I don't get a warning. It's just like crash, you know, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know, oh, I've been working too hard.
But
And
you
you
have
don't
to say
realize it.
yes.
It's like cumulative, you
Yeah.
know. But now it's just different. I do different kinds of work than I did when I started out, and it's I don't know. I feel like I'm sort of able to focus more on each project, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra, because you're chief there.
Yeah.
Is that correct? And that's pretty exciting. I love that country so much. Please talk about this orchestra. Are they wonderful? Do they love you? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, well, it's been an amazing journey. I've been there for 6 years. I think it's my seventh year this year, and it's a small orchestra that was at a really difficult kind of place in its sort of development when the earthquake hit in 2011 that really leveled that city. That orchestra was at a low ebb. It had been struggling for audiences, and it's a big concert hall in Christchurch too. I don't know if you've ever played the Christchurch Town Hall. It's like a 2,300 seat venue. It's one of the best acoustics I've ever performed in my life. And the orchestra sort of had to remake itself from that low point, and coming out of the quake, all the venues are gone. It's like, where do we rehearse? Where do we perform? And I wasn't there yet. I got there, and it must have been 2014, 15 even, 14. And I got to sort of be a part of that rebuild, not just of the city, but of the orchestra. So, I was going there 8 times a year, and we were performing in an Air Force museum, which was the best venue we could get. It had planes in it, and it was incredible space to perform in, unconventional. And the audience really got onto this idea that the orchestra somehow had merged its values with that of the city and what the city was going through. So the orchestra became this kind of beacon of resilience, and like, we're still going, and we're doing these concerts, and we're pressing forward. And also it gave people a chance just to come out and do something normal, which they hadn't had the chance to do. And it made me realize the massive difference between audiences for orchestras and supporters of orchestras. They're different things. They're really, and the support that we had in Christchurch was just phenomenal. And people just came sort of more and more to each concert. We just had to bring more chairs in because there was no fixed seating in that venue. So for our masterworks, but we did massive stuff. We were doing Britain War Requiem, Beethoven 9, all of this amazing stuff. Bartok Miraculous Mandarin, I remember we did one year. A really adventurous programming. It was great. And people just kept coming. And, in that 7 years since, it's been more than 7 now since the quake, since I've got there at least, we're now back in the town hall. The orchestra's had a purpose-built rehearsal space, built specially for it, multi-level offices, a rehearsal studio, library, storage. You got the town halls back refurbished and open, and we get between 15 and 1,800 people to every concert we do in the town hall, and it's phenomenal. And that's just like been built over years. It's something we're all really proud of there, and the musicians are wonderful. It's there's a lot of younger musicians now coming into the orchestra, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a terrific experience just to be a part of a journey like that, and see what an orchestra can do for a city. That orchestra is different structurally. It's half of its mission is community outreach and education, and the other half of it is concert work. So I guess they do about 26 weeks a year concerts. I guess they do opera and ballet there as well. But I haven't been able to get there this year, and I went back there 2 weeks ago, and that was my first concert for the year. It was crazy. But we're doing the Bernstein Mass this year.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's the 50th anniversary of that piece, and I think we're the only orchestra in the world currently doing it, because
incredible.
it's impossible to stage Bernstein Mass anywhere else, really.
Yeah. And how has having your own orchestra affected your development as a conductor? Maybe you get to program, you get to work with the same people over time. How does that affect you?
It's more hands-on, certainly. Yeah, more hands-on with programming, looking at multi-year kind of strategies to develop the orchestra, doing bigger things. I mean, I've done a lot of really big stuff with MSO too, I have to say, but Bernstein Mass, how often does that come up? Those kinds of things, a Britain War Requiem, these big works there. So, and I think just the responsibility, it's different. A chief job is different. I mean, I'm so thrilled that MSO's now appointed a chief conductor. Jaime Martin is going to be wonderful for this orchestra. He's just going to be fantastic. I'm really excited about that, and all of the ideas and energy, freshness he's going to bring. That's what a chief does. That's a really important part of it, is that sort of lifting people up the whole time and re-energizing, reinvigorating people. And I love doing that in Christchurch. I love getting there, and we work hard, and I think the orchestra's developed a lot over the last 6 or 7 years.
And that weight of responsibility, you seem to be really strong. You have strong arms, Ben. It seems like you're not sort of crushed by this weight of responsibility the whole time, and maybe that goes back to your sharing attitude.
You know what? I think it's not the arms that are strong, it's the foundations. Like the foundations, because I came to conducting late, right? So I was already a little bit more, I mean, I'm not the most mature person you'll ever meet in your life, but at least I was older when I started. I'd had a bit of life experience. I kind of knew
what musicians are like.
People. Yeah, I knew my way around people a little better, I think, than some people who are 18, 20 years old standing up on the podium. It's super hard, I reckon. So I think that's probably the thing that stood me in the best stead was, I had really great training, and it's just been a solid base, you know what I mean? So I'm not like, I don't, and it's funny, all the performing, I don't know what you're like before a concert. I still obviously get excited and get anxious and nervous like anybody, but I'm not intimidated by it, I enjoy it. I enjoy the pressure,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My colleagues and I often talk about how stepping onto that stage, sitting down, opening the music, it's the most relaxing moment of our day, because we're totally in control of what we're doing. We know exactly what's going to go on. And if Ben Northey walks up on the podium, well, he's just going to take care of it. Now, I've got one question for you before we open it up to the internet audience. So the last question, I'd really like you to give some advice to young conductors, assuming they haven't had the background that you have. So what do you think you could have done with more or in your student days, or do you think you've missed out on anything, or what sort of advice do you offer to them trying to get where you are today?
It's a question I'm asked a lot. I mean, I think it's a different pathway for everyone. And actually look at, Jaime's come out of a lifetime of a career as an orchestral musician, come into conducting with all of that experience. Umberto Clarici's done a similar thing now in Sydney. I love that, coming from within the orchestra and instrumental background. For other people, it's totally different. The piano playing opera pathway is still very much there and alive. But really, you have to develop your own taste. If you're going to be a conductor, you probably should be a very experienced musician as a performer, I think. It's not essential, but I personally think it's important to understand that side of what's going on. But developing your taste is something I wish someone had told me earlier. Like, I guess everyone does it sort of subconsciously, but actively going and cultivating what your likes and dislikes in music are, because that will inform all of your decisions. And that's what conductors are. We are taste arbiters. We have to pick tempos. We have to decide on how a piece is going to sound, the kind of attack of a note. We have to make those choices, and that's all determined by our own tastes. And we get judged on our tastes as much as we do about our execution of how we do it.
You do indeed. I used to judge you harshly in the early days.
Fair enough.
Yes,
yeah,
no, I did, because I lied. I have another question. How have you developed your early music sensibilities over the years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we studied early music at the Sibelius Academy. We had quite an intensive period of study. And I think that's just now seeped into all of that classical era music. So if you don't understand how period performance practice has influenced the performances of Mozart symphonies, of early Beethoven, Haydn, etc., you know, the world's just there. You have to get that. And you know, that was a lot of the music I conducted early on, was that smaller classical music. So, but I mean, I'm again nowhere near an expert in that field. It's just something that I think every conductor now has a better understanding of.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And you don't need to be an expert. You just have to kind of know the basics and just present a different style with a different era of music. Look, that's enough questions from me. We've got so many in the chat here.
Right.
Here come the questions. From Dylan Stewart. Ben, have you crossed paths with any of the Blue Lake musicians in the years since?
That's a really good question. The answer, I think, is no. I mean, you know, it was like a little 2 weeks, I think it was, little window in time where I didn't even know where these guys were from. I mean, they were from all over America. I wish I could remember the name of the tutor. He was this unbelievable jazz musician from New York. Like, it wasn't Branford Marsalis, but it was someone like that. And I just was too young and stupid to remember his name, you know. But so no is the short answer. But I've got a lot of photos. I've got a lot of photos. Yeah,
because it was it would have been pre Facebook, LinkedIn, blah blah blah. Because now, if you do an amazing project, everyone hooks up on the internet, and you know you can connect with them forever.
No, that's it. It was 1986. Yeah, I mean, that's how old I am. Like, you know, so it was just a moment in time that was incredible, and you just, it's in your memory, you know.
Next question is from Mel Smith. What composers have left a lasting impression on you, and why?
I
know
think
there's too many.
Great music, it can be so different from one composer to the next. I mean, Beethoven, how do you know, Mozart, all of these, the masters and the kind of bedrock of the whole thing. But, you know, I guess I think we were talking about this in our interview too. My favorite era of music is that the 20th century modernist aesthetic. I love Debussy. I love Ravel. I love Stravinsky and Prokofiev. And I just love that. And into Sibelius, like I sort of learned a lot about the music of Sibelius at the Academy and living in Helsinki for those years. But, you know, new music as well. There's just so much great new music out there that's incredible. Australian music, wonderful composers. You know, I must have conducted the music of, I don't know, 100 Australian composers, all of which I've enjoyed thoroughly. So whatever I'm working on at the time, that's my favorite.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Here's one from Helen Honeycomb. Loved hearing about your youth, Ben. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self? What would you do differently? Good question.
That's a good question. Keep playing the piano. That was stupid. I should have kept playing the piano much more. I still play a bit, but it's you know, that was silly, not keeping that up. And my kids they're learning the piano, whether they like it or not.
Yes, vicariously living through the children,
making up for it. Yeah.
Here's one from Splitting Hairs.
All right.
Ben, will you let Sarah take over your show again?
I think we've all seen enough. I think Sarah gets the gig. She gets the gig. It's Up Late with Sarah Curro from here on in. But, you know, you're a natural at this, Sarah. I really mean that. You're just unbelievable. And, you're a complete gem.
Ben, how many times have I seen you do a fantastic show? You're one of my teachers, I tell you. But the serious question from Splitting Hairs actually was, have you conducted all the major symphony orchestras in Australia? Brackets, which one is your favourite?
Oh, yeah. Easy question to answer. That's a fact. I get asked this actually off the record quite a lot. And, you know, I mean, I have conducted all of the Australian symphony orchestras. I've got a really wonderful relationship with all of them. And that's something I'm really proud of, is that fact that they have invested in me over the years. And I'm really conscious of that. You know, it's been a pathway that I hope other conductors have as well. You know, I've been really lucky and fortunate to have that kind of investment over time. And I think that's the thing about young musicians. Don't feel like you have to be perfect straight away, right? You can develop over time. In fact, your capacity to learn and develop is more important than what you're doing when you're 20 years old. You know, it's about how can you build on and go to the next level of what you're doing. And I really think that's crucial. And that's what the Australian orchestras have given me, opportunities over years and now decades to keep developing. And I hope that I've shown, that capacity to kind of be better, and keep learning along the way as well. But, when we talk about Australian music, and you were talking about how the rest of the world might view Australia, I think, a long time ago, and maybe in some corners of the world still now, there's kind of a feeling that Australians are known for our cultural achievements. But I just don't think that's true. And I actually think the rest of the world looks very, very favorably towards Australian music in particular. Like the world is just, there's so many Australian musicians out there doing incredible things. Our composers are, are great. Our soloists are great. We've got great orchestras. I mean, that's the one thing. When I've got colleagues, a lot of my colleagues at the Sibelius Academy are now conducting orchestras all around the world. And when they come to Australia, they're like, wow, these orchestras, my goodness, they're really blown away. So I enjoy going to all of the orchestras. I'm certainly not, Melbourne is the orchestra that I have the closest connection with, the one that gave me my start, my first ever concert, so that'll always be, my special place, to come back and see all of you again, and get that amazing energy from the MSO musicians.
Yeah, you're like family for us. It's beautiful.
Well, it's it's been an incredible journey, and I mean, I have to pinch myself sometimes. Honestly, I'm standing up there going, "How did this happen?
Yeah,
this is unbelievable. How good's this?
Great.
How good's the music? How good is music? How good is it?"
Yeah. I know. Oh, look, there's about 5 more questions here. Easily done, Ben. You're a pro. Another one from Splitting Hairs. Do conductors get to pick their own programs with the MSO? That's the specific question.
Well, yes, after a while. I think when you're first starting out, there are sort of limitations. Someone will offer you an opportunity and say, this is what you're doing. That's how it worked for me. I remember my conversations with Colin Cornish when I was first starting out. It was like, we've got a concert for you we'd like to offer you. It's Beethoven 6, Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, and Hebrides Overture. And I was like, yes, you had me at concert. But as you kind of get more experienced, and again, it comes down to this, I think orchestras also want to know what it is you would have something to say on, what repertoire are you going to really do well. And there's nothing worse than, taking a concert that's a symphony that's just not you, or you don't do as well as the others. Like, that's a terrible feeling. So yes, over time you get to have a lot of input into the programming.
I remember in the old days, your old days, you would be replacing people. When you got the bigger programs, you would be replacing people. You weren't given those opportunities, the Mahlers, the big
that's right. Yeah, I remember
unless you were replacing someone. But it's almost better that way, because if you're just called in a few days before a Mahler 9 or whatever, then everyone's going to be like, yeah, good job.
Oh, no, it's true. I mean, you're at an advantage doing a step in. There's no question about that. And that Mahler 4, which Donald Runnicles couldn't make, and that was a big thing to step into. And I just remember how much the orchestra gave that week. And
Mahler 4, that's what it was. Yeah, I remember.
Mahler 4.
Yep.
And see, I hadn't conducted the full orchestral version of Mahler 4, but I'd done a chamber version with the Melbourne Chamber Orchestra years before. And again, it's just that you've got these things to fall back on.
Yes.
Like if you've done it, or if you've taken that opportunity, you just never know when it's going to pay off, later on. Absolutely. And so I was kind of starting at a higher base than just walking in cold,
Yeah. Okay, we have one from Tharanga Basnayake. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that well. Does Ben consider himself a leader within the MSO? And if so, what characteristics does he foster within the other leaders of the MSO?
Oh, that's a good question. I think if you're a titled conductor of an orchestra, you've got leadership responsibilities for sure, and you have to lead to some extent by example as well, and show a good example for people to follow. And it's not just within the orchestra. I think I was thinking about this too, and it's important that we've got Australian arts leaders who are very, very visible publicly in our kind of, cultural life, in our just our life here in Australia, constantly putting the arts in the conversation about how decisions are made, what our role is, what our relevance is, advocating, reminding politicians how many people engage with the arts and why it's important, because it's something that you need to continually argue for the whole time. And there's many people doing that. But I think this is one of the things that all musicians can do, actually. We can make our case all the time. Everyone's a leader. Everyone can be a leader. It's just doing something that you'd like more people to do. That's all it is. It's doing something that you would expect other people to follow. So I love doing the work for the MSO that might be about promotion and doing an interview about a concert, publicizing something, because to me it just keeps what we're doing kind of in normal life, in the normal life of people, more people.
Yeah.
It's not something that happens in a little corner of the arts world. It's something that everyone knows what's happening at the MSO in Melbourne. It's important. It's really important to do.
Here's another one from Helen Honeycomb. Ben, you've played quite a few instruments. Which section would you play in with MSO if you had the choice? Oh, sit next to me, Ben, please. You wouldn't though, would you?
Oh, they're all so amazing. I mean, the string section of the MSO is pretty amazing. Like, I'd love to have that would be a real fantasy to sit in the, well, let's say the first violins, Sarah?
Yeah.
Up the back of the firsts.
Yeah. It's hard on the left ear, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's true. There's something to love about every instrument, and we rely on each other, don't we? We all rely on each other, and everyone has to bring their magic on every instrument they play. I'd be happy sitting anywhere in the MSO, to be honest.
Oh, gorgeous. Here's one from Mel Smith. What piece of music sounded deceptively simple, but when you performed it, it was more difficult than you expected? Now, I'm assuming this is when you conducted it, or when you... Maybe it's just a general question. What looked
anything
easy?
Of Mozart. Anything of Mozart.
See, this is the early music thing, maybe.
Probably. I mean, you've just got a lot of choices with that repertoire, a lot of responsibility to make decisions about the style.
Yeah.
And the more you know, the harder it becomes. So, the best Mozart I did, I reckon, was when I knew nothing. And it was just pure instinct and just let the musicians play and that whole thing. And then the more I kind of thought, oh, actually, there's a lot more to this. And it became much harder over time. I've always found that. And his tempos sit in the cracks of big beats and small beats.
Yeah.
So you're either in 6 or 2 or in 2 or in 4.
Yep.
And it's very difficult. And on the page, it looks square,
looks easy.
And logical and easy, but it's just diabolical. Yeah, really tough.
Great question and surprising answer. Yeah. Okay, here's another one from Shirin Albert. How do you spot great talent, be it musician, soloist, conductor, etc.? And is a formal university education necessary to develop conducting skills?
Well, no is the short answer to that. I mean, it's part of your musical training. So however you get your musical training, the one thing I would say about conducting, and this is a bit of a bugbear of mine, it's an art that needs to be studied and learned. It's not just like, I'm a great musician, I can do it. Some people might be able to do that quicker than others. But as somebody who spent 6 years studying conducting, you have to practice it and study it. And there's a lot to it. It's not just inspiration. It's not just music. There's more to it than that. And it's all about giving yourself the tools to effectively communicate, and then your ideas can come through. But if you're somebody who has no technique, for example, and you just can't show what you want,
Yeah.
you're just stopping all the time and just explaining
talking.
in rehearsal. And it's
Oh.
just like, who wants that? And so it's a non-verbal art form. It's actually a non-verbal art form at its purest, what is conducting level. That's what it is. It's the replacement of words with gestures. And so, that is the key. But in terms of spotting talent, I reckon that's a talent in itself. Some people are really good at looking at someone, whether it be an instrumentalist or a conductor, and going, I reckon I could see where they might be in 10 years, and not everyone can do that, but some people are really good at that. So I guess everyone's looking for different things. Everyone's looking for different things. Yeah.
Well, Ben, we are out of time, but the quote of this evening, I believe, is the replacement of words with gestures. That is beautiful. I can't.
Makes this show a bit redundant, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. But look, thank you so much for sharing all of that gold with us all over the internet. Thank you. And this will be up on the YouTube channel for everyone to see. Thank you, Ben. You're just marvelous.
My work is done. It's your show now, Sarah. It's your show.
Well, here's the wrap up. On the next episode of Up Late with Ben Northey, Ben will be interviewing violinist Freya Franzen and horn player Saul Lewis. That's 8 p.m. Monday, the 19th of July. Check out this MSO YouTube channel for lots more amazing content. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and share. Now, I'd like to thank our ongoing wine partners, Tarawara Winery, the ABC for the recording we heard earlier, Darren, our tech guy, for pressing all the right buttons, Helen Withycombe, and the MSO for giving me the chance to ask Ben all of the questions I want to ask him in rehearsals, but I'm not allowed to talk. So, thanks everyone. Take care and stay safe. Good night.